fans, and happy Women's History Month. We hope you've got your cups filled with some tea because we are ready to share with you the HERstory of WOSO. My name's Megan Warner, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Harlie Ford and Katie Goodman. How are you both doing today, guys?
Marvelous. Super stoked to be here. I'm really excited to be talking about women's soccer in terms of historical proportions, as you both know. And also, I do have tea with me, kind of.
Oh,
Kind of.
I love tea.
Yes, listen, it has tea extract in it, so it counts. So that's all I gotta say about that.
Yeah. I've got water today. I'm a little dehydrated from all the coffee I drank earlier. So I gotta hydrate now. But yeah, you guys, this is gonna be a great episode. Harlie went hard in the paint on history. She is a history buff of the group. And, we're just gonna have to let her take it away on this one. And then, we'll do the best we can to hang in there with Harlie today. She killed it, guys. She killed it.
Thank you. Yeah.
We could honestly submit the document that Harlie prepared to be published or something. There is so much stuff in this, and if you don't know anything about the history of football in general, and then specifically women's soccer, I mean,
you're about to
take notes if you want. You're about to,
You're about to get learned, okay?
So I have to say, before we jump into the show, I can't believe that it's March and February is over. Our February segment just made February fly by.
Yeah. We were pumping stuff out every week, covering games.
3 videos in one night.
Wow.
I mean, come on now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, even though we're on a more even keel for the month of March, it definitely feels like time is just flying by. It's almost, is it spring yet? Oh my goodness.
I think March 20th is the spring equinox.
It's messed up.
But it feels like spring because Texas weather is erratic all over again. 1 minute it's hot, 1 minute it's cold, 1 minute it's in between.
I saw you guys
that's
had
how we know it's spring.
Ice storms, tornadoes, wind, and absolute worst humidity all in the span of 24 hours. So
oh god.
Weather is wild. So on Saturday I ran in shorts, super hot. Sunday I played my indoor game and I came outside and it was snowing.
Now that's crazy. That's some bipolar weather right there.
Yeah, I can happily admit that Florida's been pretty even keel the last week or so, but yesterday and today, I don't know where this came from, but we have gotten torrential rain that we have not seen in months and months. So that's how you know spring's here. When it starts raining every day in the afternoon, welcome to spring. My goodness. Anyway, my car was getting super dusty, and I was like, gotta take it to car wash. And then yesterday happened, I was like,
nice. Yeah, I guess hurricane season is coming up too.
Yeah. No. Anyway, hi guys.
Hurricane season means hurricane parties. Come on. It's not a bad.
It's the best time. We get some hurricane cakes. It's a good time.
Yeah.
But how do you guys feel about starting this conversation about women's soccer and her story about it?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Feel pretty good? All right. So we're gonna open this up with just the primary tale of soccer, and for those of us in North America, or those of us outside of North America, we'll call it football. So we'll change between the terms every now and then just to mix it up. It's fine. But yeah, so as long as humans have had feet, pretty much, we wanted to kick things. That's pretty much how it goes for us. Some rudimentary versions of the game can be traced back to the 2nd or 3rd century BCE with the Han and Qin dynasties in China, and then even earlier, maybe into the 4th century BCE with the Greeks and Romans. We see with them this game called Episkairos, which I have the pronunciation right, I do believe. And during this game, there would be teams made up of 12 to 14 players. And while the rules of the game did include your hands, there are artistic depictions like these reliefs on these vases where people are using multiple body parts to try and get this ball across the line of the other team. Seems kind of, I don't know.
So it goes way back.
Yeah. Super far back. So that's over 2,500 years ago. And from what I read, men were the primary players, but it does seem like women were also allowed to participate in Episkairos. So hey, we've been around since the beginning of soccer. That's pretty cool.
Wow. Makes you wonder what changed in between there, right? But I guess we're about to find out.
Yeah.
So,
Listen.
there's just so much. Trying to explore the entire face of soccer is pretty complicated, which would probably take several episodes. So we're just going to try to zip through the next couple thousand of years so that we can just get to the really juicy content and the origin of WOSO. And, we can see similar games appear throughout history with records of Inuit people playing on ice with 2 teams, a ball, and a goal in the 16th century, and indigenous populations in Australia playing a variety of games using a stuffed ball in the 19th century, although that record could date back far earlier. In Europe across the 12th and 17th century, the game developed from using hands and sticks and inflated animal bladders to primarily foot-based activity with an actual ball, not a dead organ. Oh my goodness. So people wanted to play games early on, all right? Whether it's with a dead animal, an organ, or an actual ball and sticks. This is good stuff. This is
yeah. My favorite thing about learning what the Australian natives were doing is that I think that their version of a ball was made out of a possum. So whatever people could do. I guess.
Wow. Gotta do what
I
you gotta do again.
remember specifically learning about the it was a pig's bladder typically in England, and I do specifically remember learning about that in history, like as a child in primary school. So speaking of my beloved England, my home country, it's obviously known for love and passion for the sport of football, and England is kind of the country that transitioned it to the game that we all know today. But it didn't have an easy journey. Actually, back in 1331, King Edward III banned the sport, and it was also banned in Scotland by King James I, and then again in 1572 in England, Queen Elizabeth I banned the game. And so it wasn't actually made legal until 1605. And at that point in 1605, pig's bladder were what was kind of used as the soccer ball, but the rich people were upgraded to a leather ball. So money.
They said no more stinky stomachs or bladders for us.
That all gives me a major Nightmare Before Christmas visual.
Yeah.
Where they have the little animal hats that are still alive. Yeah. Continue. Sorry.
During the 18th century, football kind of began to emerge in British schools. And so by 1815, it was required that we needed a written set of rules to kind of keep this sport in line and really establish what it was. So then in 1863, the Football Association, or the FA, which a lot of English people know, probably a lot of people around the world, the FA was created. So 1863, when I kind of found that out, I was pretty impressed that it's been around for that long and is still going strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to revisit the FA later because I got some words for it. So anyway, because yeah, it was good for men, but listen. Yeah, we talked about this lull that occurred with soccer or football between hundreds of years. So, and largely this occurred during the medieval century, and it was kind of a down period for everyone involved. It was an era when people were actively encouraged not to even bathe, because if you didn't have clothes on, if you were naked, that was a sin. Like, they want you to be dirty. So, I know. So also, any form of leisure, entertainment was also frowned upon because it was not pious or anything. So I suppose also if people were ridden with the plague at the time, kicking around an animal bladder, might not been priority number one. People weren't really going outside in the first place. So
yeah. All right.
Yeah. And then also, early versions of the game were exceptionally violent. It was acted out almost in war fashion. Men were being bloodied and bruised and throwing themselves against each other. And I found in some rule books that it was even encouraged to get some blows below the belt. So, Listen.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a little bit violent.
Just a little bit.
No wonder nobody wanted to play. No one wants to get kicked in the what.
It wasn't that no one wanted to play. It was just these rural, hidey-tidy people didn't want to get their booties beaten by these peasants, so it's fine. Yeah, so throughout the history of football, its existence has really been tenuous, and it's faced political and religious pressures to keep it away from youth, society, and women.
That makes sense. I mean, I feel like this is reflected tenfold, while the history of football is well documented, finding origins across the world in every culture throughout thousands of years, it is a history that almost makes it a point to exclude women. Not shocked at all. As mentioned previously, early as 400 BCE, women have been a part of football, but that role was a mere footnote and was the only reference we could actually find until the 16th century. Interestingly enough, in 1580, poet Philip Sidney wrote, "A time there is for all, my mother often says, when she with skirts tucked very high, with girlies at football plays." This sounds kind of low-key like a haiku. A haiku, or is it a poem? I dig it though. Yeah. So that's our one piece of evidence that women were playing in 1580.
Yeah.
That Philip Sidney would be extremely proud of your rendition.
Right. I mean, we're
bringing it back
to life all the way in 2022, so he should be proud.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to him, the only man I respect from 1580.
So yeah, there's really a 2,000-year gap that we just can't really account for when it comes to the women's game, which is pretty sad. And that gap extends to nearly 2,300 years if we consider the first major account of an organized match between women. So this is something that potentially we might revisit at a later date, but just to think that there's 2,300 years of this game that excludes half of the human race, like, can we just take a moment? Half of the human race to be excluded for 2,300 years. And I mean, we talk about how, like, we spoke about in so many different shows, how, like, the women's game is behind because of all kinds of things. 2,300 years, people, like.
Specifically 2,300 years behind. Now we can drop that.
Give or take.
How do you guys like that stat, huh?
Yeah.
How about this statistic for you? Just kidding.
Yeah. It's, yeah, I think when you put it that way, you can wonder why, we're taking a few steps to get to where men are these days. But
right.
I don't know, the way that we've been performing lately, I mean, the U.S. women's national team, I would say we're performing better than the men's side. So we only needed a couple decades to do what they did in thousands of years. Period.
Oh.
Anyway. I'm so sorry.
Burn.
So sorry.
I love it.
Anyway.
I love it.
So yeah, and also again, just to reiterate, I'm not saying that, like, we are not saying that there just wasn't any women involvement for 2,300 years. It's just really hard to find any evidence of it. Maybe they were playing in the streets, they were mothers, they were daughters, they were sisters playing with their brothers, but they weren't at the forefront of those conversations. Largely, we've been footnotes. So
yeah.
So we finally enter the 19th century, where we can finally find some women's soccer history. So the first organized team game that I could actually find occurred at the tail end of the 19th century in Crouch End, London, which, Megan, I don't know if you do know, is Crouch End still existent in London, or?
Yeah, it's still a place. I think that a lot of names that are from history, I guess, like, they remain, like, they're the same. I did look it up on the map so I could, like, be like, have I, played near there? And I have played pretty close there. I have played games within the vicinity. So, fun fact.
Yeah, that's really cool. Shout out to Crouch End for women's soccer. It's good stuff. So in 1894, a woman named Nettie Honeyball, which, can we pay respect to that kind of name?
Great, that's cool.
Yeah. I love it.
I know. It's reportedly a pseudonym because at that time, women really wanted to conceal their identities because it was, like, so insane that they were even stepping on the pitch. They didn't want these people finding them at home. So they really weren't using their real names, which is crazy.
And I feel like you can see in this name, though, Nettie, I'm thinking, like, either goal scorer puts the ball in the back of the net or goalkeeper keeps people out. And then Honeyball, obviously Ball. I'm thinking Honey, like sweet, like she was really
like a sweet hottie honey, like she's a honey ball.
Listen,
but she just like a hot goal scorer.
listen.
Like everyone needs to know it.
There are pictures of Nettie Honeyball.
Ooh, I think we need to
She's
throw
a
one of those
little
up on our
She's a
Twitter
little honey.
so people can
Okay.
see this hottie with a body who started the whole thing for us.
So she founded the British Ladies Football Club, which is pretty awesome. Like during a time when women aren't even supposed to be playing soccer, like she's out there finding a whole soccer club. Like that's awesome. And it was also despite like a wall of resistance from the spectating public. So about a decade prior to the British ladies taking the pitch, there was one other group that also tried, and I couldn't really find their name, but regardless, those women only played 55 minutes of their game before spectators stormed the field, ended the match, and sent their game and the entire organization into the dusty annals of history. I don't know a lot about these women, and I wish I did. So from what I understand, 1894 with the British Ladies Football Club, that's like legit. But about 10 years beforehand, there was another club, and if I did a little bit more research, I could probably find out who they were. But it's really sad that they're kind of gone.
Yeah, I wonder if anybody does know anything. Like, I don't know if we've got any history buffs out there watching the show, but definitely tweet us if you do, because that is just insane. Like, I would love to know more about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Leave it to the guys to screw up ladies' night. You know what I'm saying? Like,
insane.
We had one great thing going for us, and
they see a flash of an ankle and they lose their mind, and they just gotta run onto the field.
We can't hold ourselves back. You guys need to stop tackling each other.
Oh, the ankles. Oh, God.
No.
I take a sip of tea on that one.
I know, right? And I mean, for the British ladies, they really didn't fare much better. Their opening day took place in 1895 with an inter-squad match, which filled the stands with over 10,000 spectators and the streets with even more. And so while this was an audience composed of enraged faces and belittling commentary, that's the thing. It's like, it wasn't an audience of people who were loving them. It was an audience of people who were just totally hating them and just really hoping that they would fail. So the media backlash was completely immediate, and it was just terrible to see the way these reporters, wrote themselves into these circles. And some of them, they were just ridiculed in a really masculine manner for, because they're super athletic, and then just seeing others because of their skills noted as freaks of nature. And then, just they would pretty much see any athlete who underperformed as a reflection of women being biologically incapable of the sport. So for if you did well, you're manly, or you're a freak of nature, pretty much a circus freak. And then if you did well, if you didn't do well, that was pretty much par for the course of how you should have been. So that's not great. That's not a great start. Like there was no way they were going to get through that at that time.
Yeah, there was no winning there.
Yeah. Yeah, when you say 10,000, I'm like, oh, okay. And then you think, hold on a minute, that's not 10,000 little girls like looking up saying like, wow, I want to be just like you. That's 10,000 people
showing up thinking you're going to a circus,
Like it's hard for some MLS teams to get 10,000 people at their game, or USL teams to get 10,000 people at their game. Imagine 10,000 people watching a bunch of women and hating on them. Like that was orchestrated 100%.
Yeah.
Like I was like, hey, come and watch the circus.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one thing that kind of is kind of funny about how certain players were spoken about. So there was a field player who had short dark hair and played quite well, which led the crowd to believe she's a boy, naturally. A woman. She must be a boy. So she was known as Little Tommy. But then there was another player who had a similar sort of skill level. So the reporter stated that there must have been two Tommies because, again, she definitely wasn't a girl. And, So you've got the two Tommies that the reporters are talking about. Why does it need to be a boy? Why can we not just appreciate the fact that a female can play the game? And who cares what her hair is like?
Yeah.
You know, who goes to a... This is something that kills me. And I even see it like today. Who goes to a game and comments on somebody's hair or the fact that they're wearing makeup to play? Like,
Right.
let's appreciate the talent.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's what makes it funny. Is like that's something that still happens today.
Yeah.
Like it is, you see it all the time. I think when Marta stepped on the field wearing lipstick, people just thought it was like I heard some very negative comments about it, and then she turned around and she's like, "This is the blood of my enemies," or something like that. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Yeah. So, I just that is like it cracks me up. Like they couldn't even believe that. One, you could have an athletically inclined player on the field, so you have to believe that this is like a young boy or something. And then they had two players on the field who did not look like their ideal woman. So now we gotta be like, there's just two of them. There's two boys on the field. Like, how far you gotta reach? Come on now.
The reporter wasn't even creative enough to come up with another name, so they had to all. I'm sorry, if you're that creative, I don't think you should be in the reporting journalism industry.
Stupid.
Yes.
However, there was one player on the British Ladies FC that was absolutely adored. As a report described her, she was a young matron with a profusion of golden hair hanging down her back, who wore a white flannel blouse and a dark skirt.
Wow, imagine trying to play soccer in that outfit, man.
I know.
No,
so I guess
probably just didn't. And they were like, she's the hot chick. We like her.
I don't know. So I guess if you looked like the ideal woman or like a princess out of a storybook, you could play football, I guess. I don't know.
Oh my God. I mean, unfortunately, like this all goes back to how even today the game is sexualized. I mean, think about in the early 90s where women's soccer was considered a type of person only could play this intense of a sport. And now there's like really quote unquote feminine women playing the sport. It's like, it's unfortunately that entire concept is still in play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So now we know people. Now we know why. Now we know why.
One player that kind of sticks out to me is Alex Morgan. She would step on the pitch and like she had like acne, I think, or something. She was having a breakout or whatever, and she wasn't wearing makeup on the pitch, and people were like shocked that she had skin of a human being. Like, that's amazing. Like, whoa, what? This is crazy.
Like, these people are real humans too. Like, gosh.
Yeah, from games then on out, and then you would see like behind the scenes where women are having to like go into like studio sets to like get their makeup done or like make sure that their faces are pristine, because otherwise they're going to receive backlash. Like, it's like, why does this matter? Why does it matter?
Right. Right.
Why has society created this like perfect image? And I think that like a totally different subject, but the fact that there is women's soccer players who, they'll just be themselves on TV, it makes you think like, wow, okay, so all these other movies, shows, even like news reports and stuff, when you see those people's skin, like it is blemish free. It's like airbrush. It is, because you can see when it comes to soccer that like we have human skin.
Right. They don't have all the good lighting and the smoke and mirrors that most media provides, because they're out there, busting their butt, sweating their butt off. So yeah, they might sweat off some makeup, get some smeared mascara and eyeliner here and there. Like, God forbid we aren't a picture perfect image for people. So yeah, I mean, it's all interesting, how it still is very much in play. And just going back to this team we had just mentioned, that club only remained active for a few years after that. So mounting financial and social pressures forced the team into retirement for nearly 20 years afterwards. So women's soccer was a ghost story, and it was a ghost story, but only up until the First World War, where men were sent off to battle and the ladies took to the pitch in their absence. Aha! So maybe that's what we need. People get these guys out here and give us some space and give us a chance to have a little fun, right? But these women, many of them were actually working in ammunition factories. They organized charity matches to raise money for the war effort and wounded soldiers returning from the front. So, I mean, talk about an honorable cause, something that's so honorable, even though you've been pushed out of the sport, to bring it back in a way with such honor and charity. Like, of course women did that because they are very community oriented. So I love how that kind of came back into play, and so with that, the game became really popular and even began to find support just because of its charitable nature, but also because the women were actually playing really good football. So I love that.
No, it's super special.
Yeah.
And then in 1920, the world witnessed a tremendous milestone in women's soccer. On Boxing Day in Liverpool, a match between the Dick Kerr ladies and the St. Helen ladies took place in front of a whopping 53,000 spectators, while an estimated 10,000 more were turned away at the gate. And, we're hoping that these were the good kind of support.
Yeah.
Leading up to this match, the public rallied behind the women's game. It was fun, it was boisterous, and it was a pleasant break from the horrors of war. I love that escapism that women's soccer provided for them. I think that's something that we kind of all experience, when life gets tough. What do women's soccer players want to do? We just want to go out and play. Like, that is what we're here for. Right. And in many ways, its popularity was also its demise, because this match was of historical proportions, ranking as the biggest crowd at a women's game in England for over 90 years. And the game which many attribute to the drought of soccer that followed, because, that crowd was not reflected again for a very, very long time. And if that crowd was at a women's Super League game now, that would be a triumph. That's a big crowd. That is something that would be definitely spoken about. And it's wow, but 90 years.
Yeah, the record was not broken until I think a World Cup game or a women's FA match in 2012. So
wow,
insane. Wow. Yeah, I mean, as we talked about, this is a tremendous milestone for women's soccer. They had 53,000 people show up in the stands, and then another 10,000 out in the streets. They just want to see this game, because the Dick Kerr ladies, they were a tremendous team. They were founded in 1917. They had been playing for 3 years at that point. They were also part of the munitions factory, and they were exciting. They were good at football, and people wanted to see that. But unfortunately, the love and support for that match was ultimately their downfall, because it caught the attention of the FA, who I said we were going to come back to. We got issues with the FA.
Interesting, because the timing.
So they're the ones.
Yeah, the timing of when women's football was able to be played was once all the men were off fighting and at war, and so it took the men to leave before women had a safe enough environment to be able to actually play. And then once they came back, it was oh no, that's
exactly it. Yeah, when the men came back, there was a space they thought was going to be left for them, and it had been filled by the women's game. So the FA, they took immediate notice of the popularity of this game, and they responded immediately to it. They came out saying that the game was unsuitable for women, and it would affect a woman's frame and fertility. What?
Oh my gosh.
So we're going to talk about, who is it? I want to say it's Sydney Leroux, right? Who's pregnant right now, and
maybe.
I want to say I can't remember.
She's also had another child as well, so she's.
Yeah, I mean, a bunch of them. You literally see these ladies with a pregnant belly playing. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I mean, Alex Morgan played up until 8 months, I think. She was at training.
Yeah.
Wow.
Insane. Anyway.
Just saying. I mean, I know
it's
done a lot now compared to back then. So you can kind of somewhat see with the lack of knowledge at that point in time why that was raised, but it's also
just an excuse, there's they're going to bring in like your family as a way to get you off the field. Like, that's just so low. So within a year of that infamous Boxing Day match, the FA imposed restrictions and roadblocks on women's soccer to keep them off the pitch entirely. And then on December 5th, 1921, they finally just outright banned women's football. It just simply was not allowed. And from what I understand, the Football League in England was expanding at that time. Like, the men had come back, and they also had to introduce the third division. So the FA didn't want to risk losing fields or spectators to the women's game, so they just shut it all down. It was money, politics, and, excuse my language, but bullshit gender roles that kept women off the pitch in England for 50 years, until 1971, when the first National Cup for Women, which is now known as the Women's FA Cup, and kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth because the FA is the reason why they did not play in the first place. Anyway, so 1971 when the next match was held in England. So
yeah, I don't personally want to hate on the FA too much. Because, like, I don't, the people who are in charge of the FA now are not the same people.
This is true. Who
impose those rules. But it's just, I feel like it's society. It's reflected by the Football Association at that time. Were like, this is what we have to do because this is like, it's a men's game, men. Like, that's what society was in those times.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, it makes sense that they would come about in the 70s because there was so much happening with human rights during that time. Whether it was a race thing or a gender thing, like, everybody was fighting for a voice back then. So it makes sense that those games came back onto the scene around that time. It was kind of a widespread worldwide thing. So, wow. And which isn't that long ago, which is so sad. The 70s, it wasn't even the 50s.
No.
40s or the 60s. Like, it was the 70s.
Yeah.
Weird to think about.
Yep. So that's kind of, where we leave off there. We had a match in 1920 and then a 50-year gap until 1971.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, the FA are now doing great work, but
yeah, you know what? I take it back a little bit. I'm just a little heated.
Yeah, I mean,
for the women in 1920.
Yeah, we think about the way that the sport could, like, where could it be right now if those restrictions were never in place? Like, it's, we'll never know, but it does get you thinking and how much the game could have progressed in that time, because clearly
it was loved.
Back in the 20s were raw, like, they could play. They drew crowds of 53,000. So how much could it have progressed? It's an interesting thing to think about, and there is so much that we didn't cover, like what's going on in other European countries, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Italy, France, Spain. Like, there's so many different countries that will all have their own women's soccer history, and we can't cover them all. We haven't even gone over to Asia, Africa, like, there's South America, like, there's so many places. But to be honest, finding the coverage of that would be really, really difficult. I mean, it's the kind of one where you need to just speak to your grandparents and, see if they have any stories that they can remember or that they were told by their parents, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to find out about these stories. So if you do have any of those stories, we would love to hear them. Like, we would love to have you on the show to talk about them if you want.
Absolutely.
Or you can just send us an email. Our email address is ourcupofteawoso@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. We can share your letter. We can invite you on the show, whatever it is. I think it would be such a fun conversation to have.
Completely agree. I think there's an unspoken history. It's just either has been passed down through oral generations or it's just in lost notebooks that haven't really been uncovered in years. So I think it'd be really compelling and interesting to hear what people have to say about women's soccer from around the world. For today's show, I pulled research from multiple sources, and I just wanted to give a quick shout out to those resources because, hey, they're doing something for the women's game. Yeah. So I found research from The Origin of Women's Soccer by Matthew Willis, and you can find that on line. It's available. Sorry,
A
it's
whole long
Matthew Wills,
HTML.
Yeah. There's also the historyofsoccer.info/women's_soccer. I know it's a whole mouthful, but the historyofsoccer.info. They got women's soccer. It's great. And then also, the really cool thing that I was able to do was that I was able to pull excerpts from a book called In a League of Their Own by Gal Newsham, who is a former lady baller herself. She played for 20 years, I think, in the 70s. And her book is just an incredible exploration of the history of women, and especially in Europe and England. And she covers the compelling story of the famous Dick Care ladies who took the pitch in 1920. So, and I really want to read more of her book, but unfortunately it is $70 on Amazon. So if anyone's got a copy, let me know. Again, ourcupoftea@gmail.com.
It low-key sounds like a nice coffee table book. Like, look at how educated I am on women's soccer. Let me just say that
I mean,
here.
it's really cool. Like she covers Wales and Ireland and the Dick Care ladies, and just going into this history that no one's really talked about. So I'm really impressed that she's even able to find that info. Because of her work, I was able to do this work. So thank you, gal. Hope you're doing well.
Right.
Big shout out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe we can add it to the Christmas list next year.
There you go. That's on my list.
The WOSO Christmas
in a league of their own, please and thank you.
Yes. Now for our last kind of segment of the show, we're going to segue into something that is a lot heavier, unfortunately. You may have heard some things in the news about Katie Meyer we just really don't have the right words for this. But it's a topic that is, it references suicide. And so if that's something that's sensitive to you, just, take caution, or maybe revisit it later when you're feeling like you can digest some of that information. But Katie Meyer was the goalkeeper and team captain of Stanford University women's soccer team. She led the Cardinals to victory in 2019, so at the 2019 College Cup game against UNC. And from the messages sent from around the world and the stories shared by those who knew Katie on and off the pitch, she was kind, passionate, and a fierce spirit for what she believed in and for those people that she loved. Unfortunately, on March 1st, 2022, she took her own life, and she was only 22 years old. I mean, this girl was known by so many people at a really high caliber level in the soccer game. The U.S. women's national team already had their eyes on her. All kinds of things. ESPN, FC mentioned this. This is something that really hit the soccer scene heavily. And it really brought a lot of awareness to what's going on in these athletes' lives. So, I just think that it's definitely important that we just pay our respects to her, and to just bring this up because it is a really heavy topic, and we will get into that in a bit here. Megan, if you wanted to go into the details about how you can support.
So there's going to be a memorial for Katie on March 12th at 6:30 p.m. in Newbury Park, California. And this service is going to be open to friends, neighbors, teammates, anyone in the community who wants to share and celebrate the memory of Katie, because what we have now is what she left with us. And she was such an incredible person, an incredible talent. And that's what people can take comfort in. And so if you are in California and you want to go to this, it will be a really great way to kind of celebrate her life. And Our Cup of Tea wants to pay our respects in this moment of the show to her and her family. And we want to make it clear how much we advocate and support mental health awareness. Like, we have spoken about it a lot on the show. Regardless of what someone might present externally, there is a lot of people who have internal struggles that we don't necessarily know about, and they're not ready to share with people. But it's just really important. Like, please check in with people, friends, family, like, connect with people on a deeper level. If you have a teammate, do more than just see them at practice. You know, really connect with those around you and support each other, because you might even be going through similar things, but you close yourselves off, and it's a really hard conversation to have. It's a really hard conversation to have on this show. We always we don't really know how to segment into this kind of thing. How do you segment out of it? Because it's a really difficult conversation, but we want you to know that you are never alone. Like, our DMs are open. If you want to reach out to us from your phone, like, we will do everything that we can here at Our Cup of Tea to continue having conversations, to support you if you want to reach out to us. We are all involved in the game and have been involved in the game for a long time. So we kind of may be able to relate to you or give some advice, just a story shared, maybe not half, but at least you're opening up and beginning the discussion.
Right. And, I think somebody had brought this up a while back of, for situations like these, it's not necessarily that someone like Katie was surrounded by people who don't check in on her. And that's the thing with people who are going through really tough times. Sometimes you have no idea. They have such a good poker face. They're used to hiding it for so long until it gets to the point where you just puts you over the edge. Right. So what I loved about this post, and I will share it to my Twitter to give her proper, who was it?
Bethany Balsa.
Yeah. Yep. There you go. Yeah. So she is the one who made a fantastic point about actually creating a culture of vulnerability. So, like, the more vulnerable we are able to be with each other, the more that it, actually encourages other people to be vulnerable in those moments when they're really not doing okay. But just like we said from history, there's this culture of perfection that is required of women in the sport, from having their makeup done, hair looking perfect, from being sexualized on and off the pitch. Like, there's so much that women go through in women's sports that, we are doing. I think the league and everybody's doing their best to address, especially with all that we know about the NWSL and everything. And I'm not saying that's what she went through. I have no idea what she went through. But it was something that was hard enough to make her take her own life. And that hurts to think about, especially seeing a lot of the footage of Katie and how fiery she was and how everybody talks about her being the biggest light in the room. It reminds you of people like Robin Williams, who they go through so much, but they just don't show it, So again, I think it is important to know, yes, you have us as a line, as an option. Maybe you don't want to share what's going on with people that maybe you'd rather handle that on your own. But I just hope that if there's somebody close to us, and even if they're not close to us, I would hope that they would maybe want to reach out, or find a friend that you can call, that you can connect with and talk about those things with. But therapy is one of those things that while it might seem taboo, it's really not so much anymore. Everyone I know almost, I feel like, has a therapist, and there's a reason. It's because we're living in this day and age where things are not easy. Things are like really working against us. I mean, between all the social media, how connected and plugged in we have to be, how perfect we have to be all the time. I just think that it's completely unrealistic and it's completely out of human nature for us to operate in this way. So I think that, it's okay to feel down and to be sad. It's a very normal part of the human experience, even though social media makes it seem like it's not. It really is an okay normal thing to be down. And I just really hope that if somebody is feeling that way, that maybe they take the first step of trying therapy, or maybe they take the first step of say, F it, I'm going to leave it all behind and go somewhere else and try something different, instead of something so intense that you can't come back from, like taking your own life. I'd rather someone blow up their whole social circle and dip out, move to another country, but what can we say, right? Everybody operates different. Everyone's under different circumstances. Not everyone has the ability to do those things. So, it's again a hard conversation to have. And I think I can speak on the behalf of the entire UWS, since she was an SC Blue Heat player, that it's something that shook a lot of people and hit a lot of people pretty hard.
Yeah, absolutely. The stressors people experience, they are complicated, and like you said, there's just not really great words for it. So, just understand that you are not alone, and that somehow, some way, these three ladies on this podcast do believe in you, and they got your back. And whatever we can do on our end to make sure that that you're supported, like, we're there for it 110%. We also want to encourage supporting great organizations such as the Trevor Project or the Samaritan's Helpline, who are actively trying to raise awareness and create safe spaces for those in crisis. And also, if you know anyone at risk of suicide or you're in your own crisis, please call the U.S. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. And again, that's 800-273-8255, or text HOME to 741-741. You can also go to speakingofsuicide.com/resources for additional resources, regardless of what your own personal situation is, So I think those are great resources for you or anyone else who might be struggling right now.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with it. And I think the best thing about those hotlines is nobody has to know. You have someone who's completely anonymous, somebody who has no idea what's going on in your situation, who can just hear you out for how you're feeling. So I really, really highly recommend people take advantage of those, obviously, in any situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And just to go back to that memorial service, it's going to be March 12th at 6:30 p.m. Newbury Park in California. So if you are in the area and you want to pay your respects to Katie and celebrate her life, an amazing life filled with so many happy memories, you can find that information, and we'll share that information for you. And we hope that you have enjoyed this show. It was important that we had this conversation at the end. We wanted to provide the resources for you if you relate to anything that we've spoken about just now, and to pay our respects to Katie and her family and her friends. She was a huge, huge part of the women's soccer community and the soccer community as a whole. Now back to what we were talking about in the first part of the show. We will be back with the second part of WOSO HERstory. Like, there is so much women's soccer that we want to share with you. So we will continue to cover the growth of the women's game in the late 20th century all the way to the present day, including the iconic run of the U.S. women's national team ladies that kind of changed women's soccer as we know. So there's loads more to come from us. We will continue to have shows bi-weekly for now. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm just going to keep that ticker going along the bottom in case that is important to anybody.
Right.
Thank you guys for listening to our coverage of the first half of women's HERstory soccer. And I hope that we can see you back again on March 23rd.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for tuning in.